Hello, everyone. Welcome to Web Talk. Today is February 2nd, Sunday. The year is 2020. And
Yes, and that's episode 3.
episode 3. And my name is Marwan. And we have Sergey.
Hi.
Hello, Sergey. And very excited. Our third episode. And things are improving, I think, in terms of video quality and audio and whatnot.
Yes, hopefully.
Yeah. So let's delve right in, I guess. Today's topic is Svelte. Svelte is a JavaScript framework. Um, it's been making some buzz. I guess it has some things that make it stand out. We can see what they say about Svelte. So this is taken right from their website. It's a component framework like React or Vue, so the development experience is the same. You have components that you compose, and it's more declarative that way. Traditional frameworks allow you to write declarative state-driven code, but there's a penalty. The browser must do extra work to convert those declarative structures into DOM operations. And they use virtual DOM diffing that eat into your frame budget and tax the garbage collector. So instead, Svelte runs at build time, converting your components into highly efficient imperative code that surgically updates the DOM. As a result, you're able to write ambitious applications with excellent performance.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I guess this is their value proposition, is that you can still write your code the same way you do with React and other declarative libraries, but then that's only happening at build time. When your code gets transpiled, it turns into like imperative JavaScript code. There's not much magic. They compile your components down to just functions and classes in JavaScript.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it is unique in that sense because it's a compiler more so than a framework. So it has that going for it. So in today's episode, what I did is I spent a few hours here and there on just going through the tutorials, and I built up like a little POC mimicking like an online banking, like very simple online banking application. Their tutorials are pretty good. I was able to pick up most of the concepts fairly fast. They have it broken down into buckets that make sense. So the reactivities, like how, like their how there's like how their computed properties work. And they have props, which is like how you pass data down between components. Logic is kind of also outlined here. It's very similar to handlebars, I noticed.
Okay.
So you could actually get pretty far pretty quickly just by going over these tutorials here. And that's what I did, and that's what I'll show. The one thing that another thing that stuck out to me is, let's go to the REPL. The way you write the code is very reminiscent of just a regular HTML file, and I guess that's what that's what the author really envisioned, is like we should use HTML because HTML is the language of the web. So the old way of writing JavaScript applications was like this is what it looks like, and so he's tried to stay true to that. So you'll find a common theme where you just declare your scripts in here and then your HTML, and then you can actually add a style tag as well in here. and they will
Interesting.
and they will do the namespacing for you, like with CSS. If you just declare a bunch of CSS, they will take care of that, much like most frameworks do. But yeah, and REPL, I guess, is like where you'll get the most benefit or the most information. So you can write your code, and you can take a look at the JS output that gets generated. And as you can see, like, there's very little frameworky stuff going on, which is another selling point.
Interesting.
Yeah. So without further ado, I will jump.
Can I ask you something?
Of course.
So,
yes.
just like very quickly, so you mentioned that it's kind of like a compiler, right? And I remember, like, when I used to work with handlebars before, it also used to be kind of like, here is a templating language for you, and you can just, like, put a lot of templates, then they would get precompiled into JavaScript so that, like, they execute very, very quickly, and they would just accept some data in order to show or hide some elements and display. So it sounds very, very similar to Svelte.
That's a good point. Handlebars. So handlebars, they used to do that in the templating side of things, right? Like, I guess these guys go beyond that, maybe, by, for example, like, it's not just a templating language, it's more
Right.
than that. Like, you can have a state, like the state management, you can have the like, they have like a store idea, they have like the reactivity, how you would handle like promises.
Oh, cool.
So if this was handlebar, like, to look at this example where they're retrieving data, this would be more or less handlebar, but it's this that's more
Right.
in Svelte.
Yeah, I used to, like, I saw some applications that were built entirely with handlebars, and yeah, like, you basically had to re-render everything, like, if state changes sometimes, which was definitely not efficient. So yeah, it's very cool.
So in those cases, like, people were writing plain JavaScript to handle like Ajax calls and stuff like that.
Correct. So you would
Okay.
have, like, as opposite to Svelte, it was kind of, you have a bunch of templates which were later somehow precompiled into, like, those optimal functions that handlebars can handle. And then all of the logic was living separately in a separate file and was manipulating when you render this template or that template, and how do you inject the result into the DOM? Like, does it go this place or some other place? So it was a lot of kind of manual management, and yeah, like, some applications that I've seen, they were not efficient at all because, like, you make some small changes and then, like, it basically needs to re-render entire application, which is opposite to what you said about Svelte, that it should do those surgical kind of DOM manipulations.
Yeah, so I think it's building on that idea. Like, it looks like it's handlebarsy in the template section, but there's way more how the two marry, like the JavaScript, and they kind of have a solution for both, I guess. So that might be the difference. I mean, to be honest, like, what stood out to me about this framework is the idea that, yeah, we should shift our mind from having a framework at runtime to having a framework at build time, like, I think that's a powerful idea. We should be writing more sophisticated compilers that will just convert everything to, like, the dumbest JavaScript bundle. So they kind of have it like a different mentality. They have a different take on this idea. I guess like Elm and a bunch of other ones also have the same idea. This is something that is still within JavaScript.
And can you expand a bit more on that? So like what's build time versus runtime?
Yeah, like it's, like you want the development experience to be really amazing for developers, and basically they should write the least amount of code, or
right.
they should write it in a way that is readable, makes sense, easy to read, and easy to maintain. And that should be their world, and the output, the developer shouldn't even care what the output looks like. I feel like with React and Angular, you're shipping a lot of the framework stuff within the browser, because like the virtual DOM, right? Virtual DOM still makes it to the browser.
Yeah.
And there's a framework that has to do that. So I mean, this is the value proposition of Svelte. Yeah, maybe I'm not fully capturing it, but yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, so like the way how I understand it now, it's like it's actually interesting. Like it never, well, like that's the first time I'm seeing Svelte. But I wonder what would be the experience of building like a really large application where, say, like you need support of maybe 20 people. Like how would it work there? I understand that there should be a very big performance gain because you're not shipping the framework. Like it's trying to utilize as much of the kind of like what browser supports. And it's very interesting.
Yeah, and there is a tweet by the author in terms of performance. Apparently, there was like a POCs, like those little POC terminals, like that you use to take payment. In Brazil, like there's a company that has like millions of those POCs, and they're very underpowered. And they tried React, and they tried Svelte, and it was struggling with React, but with Svelte they were able to deploy it on millions of devices. So that's something that the author mentioned. So it, yeah, and another thing he talks about, I guess, is embedded systems. Like he's like, we're moving towards embedded systems, so we have to have the least amount of footprint.
Yep. Good point.
Yeah, but like I'm not doing I haven't thoroughly looked at all the frameworks to say that this is a good one. This is just what I've. It's kind of like I'm also like learning about Svelte in a way. I can't say that it's amazing or not, but some ideas are very unique that I wanted to highlight.
It's very interesting for sure. And do you know, like one more question, do you know if there is a server-side capability to render with Svelte?
Yeah, they do have a sister project called Sapper or something. And maybe it's on their web. Yeah, Sapper, yeah. So Sapper is supposed to be the equivalent of like Gatsby for React. And I forgot the other one that is for Angular. But it's supposed to allow you to build websites based on Svelte components.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that's how you would achieve server-side rendering. Yeah. So I'll go quickly over the demo. And I'll just go over the structure quickly. So I basically worked on that, yeah, like I said, a few hours here and there. And this is the structure. How I got started was I had to basically, which I find a bit weird, you go to the REPL and sorry, first day with the mouse. Yeah, so you go download, and you will get like a good starting point. They don't have a CLI yet, so you'll get this starting point, which will give you the rollup config. So rollup is another bundler, as you may know. You got the package JSON, a bunch of scripts you can run, and yeah, some public files, the HTML that everything gets embedded into. So yeah, pretty lightweight, I would say. It's just simple configurations. Yeah, that's another thing that the author talks about, is like it's becoming too complicated to get started on front end development projects. You know, you need a bundler for everything, and you need a runner. Ironically enough, you still need a roll-up bundler, but I guess it's trying to minimize that. Yeah. Okay, so let me run this project.
And what did you do right now? So like, how did you run it?
Yeah, so well, me and you are big fans of WebStorm, so you know how in WebStorm you can configure tasks that you can run, but basically if I don't use WebStorm, I'm just running the dev.
Okay, so it's running that rollup with C and W flags.
Yeah. Not totally sure the difference.
So W must be for watch and C is compile?
Maybe. Yeah, so I wanted to see what the final build looks like. Like if I do build, if the production code looks different than the dev code. I'm sure it is, but I haven't had a chance to compare. So maybe if I have time, I'll compare it. Yeah, so it's under 500, which is not interesting, but it's nice because every framework wants to run under 4200 for some reason. Okay, so this is the app that I built, and it's the best bank of Canada. We all know it, right? Like, really famous.
Yeah.
A bunch of transactions. Yeah, you can log in, log out, put in a bunch of stuff, and you have to have the right credentials. webTalkTO.
Oh no, you used my password.
Yeah, sorry man. Your password is all over the net now. Yeah, so typical like real world application where you have like a component here, and you have a component here, and you have like an app component, right? So I wanted to, touch on the different topics, I guess, in my POC. Is like, how do you pass props down? How do you emit events up? And how do you fetch, like how do you make HTTP calls and deal with asynchronous data? And computed properties also. Like how do you have one property watching another property, and evaluating based on the changes to the original property. So I was able to achieve most of these in here. I wanted to add a store to see how because the store is supposed to be built into the framework, so you don't need to pull in a Redux or NGRX if you're using Angular. But yeah, the store looks a bit more like observables, like in RxJS.
Okay.
Let me see quickly. So let me go over the stores, because that is an interesting topic. Yeah, like this is reminiscent of RxJS. You have an observable and you subscribe on it, you get the value, you can unsubscribe. So I feel like it's kind of a good thing. This framework is taking a lot of concepts from like Ember, Angular, React. It's kind of cool. Like the reactivity is very similar to Ember. or I guess like getters in Angular as well. This stuff looks a lot like RxJS to me.
Yep.
Yeah. So let's go through the code quickly. So I'll have this app open, and we start with the app Svelte component. Minimize these. So again, we have the script tag and we have the HTML, right? You can reference other components that are in the relative path. So this is my component now. These are my child components.
Okay.
And the first flag is authenticated. So I set it false. Refresh. So by default, I'm logged out. Okay. There's another flag, raw credentials, but what I really wanted to highlight is how we're consuming these components. So this is the authentication component, and this will show based on whether or not I pass in this flag, right? And that same component will also trigger an event on authentication that I'm listening on, and I can handle it using this flag. So if we go inside the authentication component, again, same structure. I have a script and I have my template, and first is the property is authenticated, which is in here. You have to declare it this way. You have to say export and the name of the variable, and that's how Svelte compiler will know that this is a property that gets passed in from the parent if you add this export keyword. So that's all fine, and then I have the if condition here. If I'm authenticated, then show the logout. If I'm not, show the logout button. If not, then it says you're logged out. And then I have an on-click event handler, which will basically call the logout function. Now this is how I send events up, is I have to create this dispatch method.
Okay.
So create dispatcher comes from Svelte standard library. And I say the name of the event and the payload. So if we go back to the parent, I'm listening on authentication event type, and then taking that, handling it this way, which I have a flag is authenticated, will be tripped to false, right? So now the reactivity, I can have a computed property, like I said, that watches another property, and this is an example of that. This $, I guess in JavaScript there's a label statement, so you can have whatever you want here, as long as it's followed by a colon, it's considered valid JavaScript, right? So they're piggybacking on that because it's still a valid JavaScript
syntax,
but that's how they mark it as computed property kind of thing. So now they'll have some magic that runs. If this changes, then they will reevaluate this. This Svelte framework will do that. So as you can see, it's just the opposite. I have an opposite flag, which is not even used right now, but yeah.
And then you just use it the same way it's actually used, it's just not highlighted by the buff term, but you have the condition on line 42.
Oh yeah, okay, good call. So I am using that.
So see, I wanna declare a property that is computed based on another one, then I need to put that label $sign in front of it, and then it would do the trick.
Yeah, and you just assign it to that
Okay,
other
got
component. Yeah, to the other
Right.
variable. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
But
a bit weird
couldn't
syntax. Well, yeah.
yeah, sorry. So like, couldn't you declare it as, I don't know, lat is not authenticated the same way how you had it? Oh, but because it needs to kind of listen to when that property changes, that's why you need a label. Otherwise, it would be one time.
Exactly. It will just
Okay.
run once.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're telling the compiler to put a watcher on this other one.
Mm-hmm. Got it.
Yeah. Yeah. So pretty powerful. I mean, to be honest, it's not bad. Like, I like it. So far, all the syntax, like, despite this weird syntax, but it's a very nice development experience. Like, nothing too fancy going on here. It's like you assign this to this one. You just have to put the $sign colon.
Yeah, looks good.
Yeah, and another thing is so I have this application form. So I also wanted to evaluate what it looks like to do a form, right, in Svelte, because that's a very common requirement for single page applications. So if we go in here, also wasn't too bad. I have 2 variables, password, username. I have a dispatcher. I have a function, like a callback function from the button. And I'm also exporting this additional property. Like, I'm declaring a property, basically, wrong credentials. And I'm using that to show the red message. This one. So this is what the form looks like. You declare a form tag, and then on submit, you can also pipe prevent default, and then this is the handler for the form. The input, you just have to use the syntax bind value equals to the username.
Okay. So, sorry, let's go back to that pipe. What does it do?
This will also call the prevent default, like that the form usually will do on submit. You know how?
Yep.
Yeah. It's a shortcut to...
I see.
Instead of doing like either prevent default.
Yep.
Because it's a common thing, I guess.
It's built into those like on kind of something into that syntax, because I don't see you importing it anywhere, so like I assume it's just a built-in.
Yeah, I think yeah, this is more of like, because you also don't see the on being imported or submit.
Right.
So I think these are just tokens that the compiler will understand and set up the event handlers. So maybe, yeah, to be honest, I'm not, because I think there's a whole topic about directives, and
I see.
And I don't know if I don't even know if directives are the same that they are in Angular, because in Angular, this would be considered a directive.
I see.
And
okay.
They have a bunch of. It's worth looking at quickly though. What those things are. There's a lot of information here that I haven't had a chance to cover. Let's see. Use directive. Is that it? It might be.
Yeah, so there is that use, like it's literally called use, I guess, here. So there is that use pennable, and you can define your own.
Oh, okay, so there are some built-in directives, I guess. We have to dispatch them ourselves. Yeah. Okay, so it's kind of what I thought. There's some built-in directives which handle DOM events, but then you can have your own use this on. Anyways, that's
then it's probably defining those other ones like pen start, pen move, like they should come from Penable.
Yeah, right? Like we can take a look actually. So let me just say show me. Let's see, where are those defined? So this is Penable.
New custom event.
Pen start, yeah. Which is on pen start. Yeah. Yeah, so you can define your own event listeners, I guess. Okay, so we're not that far off actually.
Yeah.
So that's a good sign because we kind of figured it out without even reading the documentation prior to this.
Yeah.
So it's pretty intuitive. Yeah, so working with the form was also easy. It was a breeze. No problems there. Which is pretty cool. It gets a lot more complicated, obviously. You can group things and do a lot of fancy stuff. For the sake of time, I never delved that deep into it.
So I have a question for you. So about that authentication form, if you can go back to the component quickly. Yeah, and you have wrong credentials, right? So it renders the form, but and you kind of export wrong credentials. You don't really assign anything to them, as far as I know. But yet it doesn't display the message. So that if wrong credentials, does it only take true and false, or would it understand that, like if value is undefined, then also don't display it?
Oh, that's a good point. We can try it out. So the parent is the one that's setting this, right? So
I see.
Let's set it to no and see if it shows up or not.
No, it shouldn't.
So I guess it's doing a truthy test.
Yeah. Cool.
The wrong credentials get set here. So when we handle the login, I dispatch this credentials event, which we're listening on here. And then I'm saying if the username is Sergey and your secure password is webTalkTO.
Should really change my password now.
Yeah. So wrong credentials equals false is when I'm setting it here. Otherwise, it's true. So, like another thing that I was testing, I guess, if I didn't explain it clearly enough, I'm trying to do the container stateless components kind of pattern. So the parent is still computing all these things, which is another thing I wanted to see, like, okay, is it a good experience to do that in Svelte? It looks to be okay. The one more thing that I wanted to show is how do we handle asynchronous data. So once I log in, .to log in, as you can see, we make an async call and retrieve some data from Maki, right? And I can actually simulate a 3D. I hope the keyboard is not too loud. I need to slow it down even more. Okay, I should probably slow it down after I log in. Oh, what the hell?
So what's going on? I don't see a request.
The request is here, but why is it happening so fast? Okay, let me just save
because
time.
It happens on the loading, not after form submission. That's my guess. let's see. Yeah, so see, like it was already pending.
Oh, really? You think so? Okay, let me try
Well, it took
flipping
2
it
seconds
back.
to load it, so
Because that would be...
maybe you put a delay in
Yeah,
your...
you're right. It is calling it an initial load. Okay, so this is not being respected then. Oh no, yeah. No, that's true because I'm calling it here. Okay, never mind. What I really wanted to show is that while it's loading... Okay, let's just flip this back to true so we can show right away. Yeah, so you have this like waiting kind of thing happening. So so we have this special syntax here with the template, and basically you can show your loader here, and then simulating a promise then and a catch.
Cool.
Would show here.
I like it. It looks good.
It's pretty good, right? Yeah, the get transactions is just a fetch call. So yeah, that. So far I've covered reactivity, props, event listeners, like how do we send events up from components, and loading async data, and dealing with forms. So I covered a few of the basic needs of a single page application. As the application gets bigger, you probably need to delve into store and animations, and they have lots and lots of documentation on these topics. Transitions is a thing that I hear a lot of people are really excited about. Makes it really easy. It's built in. Yeah, and the store is built in. So overall, let me just go back to the slides. So my thoughts, maybe I should change that. The development experience, I kind of said it wasn't good because I was having a hard time setting up the project because there's no CLI. But after working with it for a while, it's that once you're set up, the tutorials and everything and the documentation for the language is pretty concise and clear. It's just getting set up is not that easy. Also, like integrating like SaaS into your project, which is something most likely like a lot of people would do. I find that there's a lack of documentation. You'll find some questions and answers on Stack Overflow, like okay, this is how you configure a rollup to include the SaaS plugin, and I feel like it should be a lot more guided experience. Like I come from the Angular CLI world where everything is CLI. Like you want to bring SaaS, you run a command, or you can change a config. It's very like well documented. So I guess the CLI, I think it would be really beneficial to add that. So that's why I said the development experience is not that great. The language is nice, like the framework, the syntax is nice, but I think it should be a more guided development experience. The other 2 points I already covered, kind of like because it's compiler based, it makes it unique. It has this value proposition. The author was also talking about like potential opportunity to flag things, like even accessibility. Like you add an image and you have an alt tag or other accessibility rules, you can just complain, give a warning at build time. So there's a lot more you can do because you have this compiler that's looking at your code, converting it to a more simpler form. And yeah, declarative at build time, but imperative at runtime. I think that's a powerful idea. because imperative code is very efficient. Like jQuery is a very, very, or forget about jQuery. Like now we have better DOM API support. Using the DOM to manipulate things is a lot more efficient than using React to diff a DOM, like a virtual DOM. It's like you go right into you perform the operation on the spot. So abstracting those imperative operations, like let's say just set inner text or whatever, is like abstracting it using React and Angular, I think has a penalty associated with it. So if you can get the best of both worlds, making a declarative at build time, imperative at runtime, I think it's a powerful idea.
Yep.
Yeah, that's.
I'm thinking that probably like it might be good, like like if you already spend time and understand how to get up and running with it, like together with SAS, then maybe we should do another episode, that just talks about that, like how to, like quick setup, how to get started with Svelte.
With Svelte, yeah, sure. Yeah. I'll be watching this framework evolve.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's pretty good, but I have to also spend some time comparing. Like I'm interested to see how Elm does things and other frameworks. Cool. I'm not sure this will be the winner, but it does bring some unique ideas, and I thought it was different enough to try out, to get kind of gain a different perspective, because both of us like have experience with React or Angular, which is like they're very similar, right? And this was a bit more different, so I wanted to try it out. But we'll see if it gets more and more interest and stuff. Then I would definitely do another video on that.
Cool. Yeah, thank you so much. It was very interesting. Like in that half an hour, I learned like what is Svelte is really about. And like how it works, like what's the developer experience. It looks interesting. Yep.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it. Okay, let's go back to the slides. So we will jump right into our speed round for episode 3. And Okay. Do you wanna? You already have control, right?
Yes.
Okay,
so
awesome.
I actually need some help from you. But first, let's talk about what is Pomodoro technique. So it's basically a way for not necessarily developers, like anyone who needs some focus time, like in their daily tasks, and they struggle, like with a lot of interactions, maybe like a lot of things require attention, but you kind of like need to find that balance where it is the best to kind of spend time helping, as well as spend time focusing on the work that is also important for you to do. So that's where a technique like Pomodoro would help. And the idea is that there used to be timers, kind of like that, like kitchen timers that you set for, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, and that you can go and do some other activities during that time. And like once it's done, then you can kind of like come back to the kitchen, for example. So similar idea where you would set up some kind of some alarm or some countdown somewhere, like in some program, and it's going to notify you. So like during the time when it's kind of like doing the countdown, you are allowed to close, say, like email, chat, everything, just like go full focus on the task that is immediate for you. And then if someone, say, like comes and tells you, oh, like I have that thing, can you help me? If it's not really like super urgent, like production is done, then at that time you can just tell person, yeah, like I will be back in maybe like 20 minutes, and I will let you know, like I'm going to come to your desk. And people usually like would react normally to that. And if no one comes, then you just kind of like at the end of the timer, you go back and open the Outlook or Gmail or whatever is the email client. You check your chat. You like quickly do a scan, like is there anything that is urgent? You might go and check some details with your colleagues if they are not busy at the moment doing their Pomodoros. And kind of eventually you just come back to your come back to your desk, like close every distraction, and again like start the timer. So that's the concept. And I used to try different programs, and I realized that I don't really need one. That's why I wanted to bring that up. So Marwan, if you can open the programs panel and type alarm, or like clock and alarm. Yeah. And from here, you can just switch to timer.
This is like a floating thing. I just need to make it smaller. Okay, timer.
Yeah. So, and that's basically the idea. Like that's what I use. Like instead of like some other programs, I just set that countdown here, and you can edit it. Like you can give it a name. So right now it's called countdown, but I usually put some tomato inside it. So you can like pause it, and I think you can now like change the timer name, as well as like what is the actual time for the countdown. And yeah, like that's like I use that tomato emoji right in there. And yeah, like I can close it after, and eventually like once the time runs out, then it would notify me, it will play the sound. So I find that very convenient, and I'm sure that there are similar experience on Mac and Linux.
Cool. Very good. Okay, what's the next one? Okay, real world example apps. So that's something I came across the other day. Basically, it is a comparison, real world comparison of different apps or different frameworks. So there is like a bunch of front end and a bunch of back end. And the idea is to build a Medium clone, medium.com clone. So that's considered, like a real life example. So very powerful. I think if you're getting started with a framework and you want to learn what are the best practices, stuff like that, this is a good repo to reference. So you can go to Angular. There's like Angular with NGRX, with NX and NGRX. So yeah, I think that's very educational. You can look at how, the best in class apps are structuring their directories and naming things and stuff like that.
Cool.
One more thing that's in here is a comparison of the performance. There's this link, which no. Anyway, I'll find it later. But there's another chart that compares the performance of all these apps. So that's interesting too. I think Elm was the second highest, and then there's another one. App Run was the highest performing from a Lighthouse scoring perspective.
I see.
Yeah, so
cool.
Worth checking out.
Yeah. Thank you.
Welcome.
All right, okay. Subfont.
It's another one of mine. So Subfont is a command line tool that allows you to strip out your like the characters that you're not using from within your font. subset.
Mm.
So it, I guess, goes through your application or website and does an evaluation, and then it generates the new web fonts that you need to bundle up with your app. Also good for like if you want to cache fonts from like Google Fonts and you want to actually serve it locally, it will allow you to generate those fonts.
Okay, so 2 questions. How would it go through the website? Like if your website has millions of pages, then how can it possibly scan through it? Or is it just doing like one page, or just the pages that you tell it to go through?
It's using this from the code. It's saying it's using this asset graph.
Okay.
JS space for manipulating and optimizing web pages and web applications. I don't know the answer to that. Somehow it's supposed to magically do it. But it's kind of an interesting topic to spend a little bit more time on. Yeah.
And why would you want to kind of store Google Fonts locally? Like, what's the benefit to that?
Like for example, if you're deploying somewhere where there's no, like your application is not supposed to make external calls,
right?
Stuff like that. If you're behind a firewall, I mean, technically, if you can, then you should use Google CDN because like you can't beat that. But yeah, in those rare cases, and also like development environment, like I do notice sometimes it's annoying with if you're like offline or something and you run your application and this is the first time you run it, like you're on an airplane and then your fonts all don't come through. I've had that happen. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Going to check it out.
Sounds good.
Alright, so next one is Manictime, and that's basically a program that is tracking time, so it's capable of tracking time, and kind of like has the UI like that. I wonder if there are some screenshots, but the idea is that you can use this tool for kind of like tracking your own productivity. So kind of like runs behind the scenes. You can open the admin panel, which will look like that, and kind of like has some lines. First line would tell you like when your computer is kind of used or not used, like the red bar means it's not used. Then like a bunch of applications color coded, so at least you know like I'm spending some like more time or less time on those applications. And then like actual documents within those applications. Did I like say within that browser, did I use Manictime website or GitHub or Slides or something else? And let me see. So there is like a free version to it, which is pretty cool, and like it can do that automatic tracking for free. Can tag time, get some statistics out of it. So like that's something that I found interesting. Like I used this program before when I used to work like in a very small company, just 5 people, and I worked from home, and I wanted to track my productivity and try to improve it. So like that was a good way for me to know about like what I'm actually doing during the day, how much actual development time I'm spending, and kind of like which days are more productive, which days are less productive. Like when I overwork, for example, then so that I wouldn't feel guilty that, like if I take a longer lunch break next time, things like that. So it's kind of powerful, like I find. It is available for different platforms like Windows, Mac, I think even Android. I don't really know why would you want it on your phone, but maybe that's again for statistics. Like it might be helpful for you to learn something about your phone usage.
Very nice. Very
And
nice.
yeah, like there are some paid features. Don't really know if they are like very important for everyone. Like there is the idea of like Manictime server, where as an employee you could install that program and then collect data from the computers. I wouldn't really personally. I
Nice.
wouldn't. I
If you're an
wouldn't like
employer,
that.
you mean?
If you are, yes, an employer who like want to track the productivity of your
Yeah.
teammates, but I
Right
wouldn't
away, as
recommend
soon
that.
as you mention this, I'm like, that's some boss somewhere is like, I should install it on everyone's computer.
I hope that boss is not watching, like,
I
presentation
know.
about Svelte.
Sorry to all the developers if that ever
I
happens.
really wouldn't want to work in that organization, but like for your own kind of personal stuff, the automatic tracking is cool. One cool feature that didn't exist before, but I noticed that exists now in that program is the ability to, like, it kind of takes a screenshot. So every time you switch between applications, not only you can know which application you were running for how long, and then like what kind of were the titles inside the application. Like say like you're in WebStorm and triggering between tabs.
Yeah.
In addition to that, it can also capture the screenshots of like say like every minute or every time you swap between applications, so that you can also see like what was that thing that I used to work on. And yeah, like based on that, you can generate timesheets as well. Like it has some pretty cool features in there.
Very nice. Awesome. It's a good tool.
Right. Let's see what's next. And Portainer, I guess that's the last link for today. So Portainer is basically it is another Docker container that can give you a visualization of all of the containers that might be running on your system. So I guess there is live demo. We can try to, don't want to log in, but name, company, email, can try something quickly. Let's see if it works. Choose your country. Cambodia. We'll be honest this time, Canada. We're not a robot.
Be honest about the country.
Yes. Captcha. Right, I guess no more bicycles. Right.
Got it.
Try Portainer is the password. Okay, admin and try Portainer. So that's the demo application. Admin. Here we go. So imagine that you have like a bunch of Docker images like on your computer, and like maybe some things are running. You want to like learn better like what they are. You could use the command line, or maybe you could use some other programs like the built-in Kitematic program with the Docker. But this one like has a nice UI for you to be able to drill down like what do you have running locally and which containers, like what stacks, services, images, networks.
This
So
is
it's
for
just like,
local, right? Like on your
yes,
machine? Okay.
correct. And it's very easy to get started. So I believe there are just 2 commands that you need to run in the terminal as long as you have Docker in order to start it up. So I think if we click on get it now, then yes, it's just these 2 commands. So you create a kind of persistent volume so that it would store some data. Remember your password, for example, from the first time when you started, and then some port mapping. And yeah, like it would just kind of observe of everything. Like it would communicate with Docker CLI on your host machine and tell you what do you have running. And one more cool. Yep.
No, I was just gonna say like this beats you know how like WebStorm has the Docker thing, but yeah, this is much better.
Yeah, like I guess a bit more flexibility, but like whatever tools are like, as long as they are working for you, then
Yeah, it's definitely
keep
better
using it.
than just running the command line. You need some AI.
Yes, yes, exactly. And something that was cool about it, I think there is a registries. So there is that app templates, and you can search, like you can see, I can quickly spin up WordPress or, the cockroach DB, whatever it is. I think
I think that's a
there is,
real database, right? Pretty sure.
yeah, didn't work with that
It's not
before.
a big name.
Serverless. I think they used to have way more templates. Show container templates. Oh, here we go. Drupal, Cloud, Magento. That's for CMS. If we try to clean that up. Right. So now the list is way bigger. Okay. So maybe let's try to spin up WordPress C. Name my stack. This root password is D. So anyway, like it's going to deploy it like based on the templates that already exist somewhere, and after that you should be able to like get up and running like very quickly.
Very nice. Sweet.
All right.
Portainer, and it's free.
Yes,
Okay.
it is free.
Okay, that's good to know.
It's an open source project.
Awesome.
Cool.
Do we have any more links?
No.
That's about it. Okay. Well, it's been a pleasure, and thanks for your time, Sergey. Thanks everyone who's still with us.
Thank
And,
you for great demos.
Thank you. We'll see you next week, hopefully.
Yep.
Okay.